Hey, everybody, my name is Kevin Wallenbeck, also known as Wally, and we're here on the View from the Top podcast again today, where we help family first business owners and entrepreneurs get through the valleys and up the mountain to their very own view from the top. We're so glad you listened in today. I've also got the host of the show, Aaron, also known as Big A Walker, in the house. How you doing, Big A?
Come on, Wally. I need a raise.
You need a raise?
I need a raise. I need to make more money.
Oh, is that what it is? I thought you were going to talk about a raise of something else.
I'm tall enough. I need a raise.
You
my
are
next
tall
door neighbor, Mike Ashley, was a dentist, and he was my buddy I was his patient. I want to say 33 years, 34 years when he got out. I was his second patient, and we had a deal. We traded like all the time, like, because I was in the pawn shop business, and we had those stores for like 27 years. And
What did you trade for
well,
dental work?
diamonds and gold for his wife or his kids,
Great.
or I traded him a Rolex watch for a lot of dental work that we had once. And I mean, he still got that watch, by the way. This watch was killer. It was a GMT Master. It was beautiful. 18 karat is a beautiful watch. But anyway, I used to trade with him. So what I would do is we would go get all the dental work done, and he'd build up like a big balance, and he'd come and buy his wife a diamond ring for Christmas. Or I'd go 3 or 4 or 5 years and not pay him, and he'd say, "Hey, Big A, I need a watch," and I'm like, "Okay, here's this Rolex GMT Master," and so we would trade. Well, he retired. Like, he went away. It's like he's living in Florida now instead of here, and he retired. And Robin had to go to this new dentist.
Oh,
And she came home the other day and she said, "Hey, I need an implant." I said, "What? Why didn't you get that when Mike was here?" And she said, "Like, I can't help it. Like, what do you want me to do?" And I said, "Well, how much is that, Rob?" And she goes, "It's like $7,000. This is like the fourth one that she's had." And I said, "I've got a new Mercedes in your mouth." I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm ill right now. I'm thinking about paying $7,000 for this tooth.
it's
I'm
crazy.
Hey, I'm curious,
Simon,
like, do you go to the dentist? I mean, have you been,
uh,
like, lately?
yeah, I mean, I go to the dentist. We took the kids when they were younger. I think the longest stint that I went without going to the dentist was about 10 years.
Well,
Yeah.
10 years, you didn't go
Yeah.
get your teeth cleaned or
I
cavities or
know. I
nothing?
have great teeth. So here's the thing. Like, I'm 50 years old. I had a root canal one time, of course, that was a whole different issue. I've had one cavity uh, the whole time.
Well,
And I
that's
went to the
because you got
dentist
this
after like
stem
10
over
years.
your teeth and the cavity, the sugar can't get down in there. You haven't
I
got your
don't know.
teeth
I
cleaned
went
in
to the
10
dentist
years.
after 10 years, and they're like, "You haven't been in here in a while, have you?" I was like, "No, I don't remember. It was like
Oh
5
my
years ago."
goodness.
Like, no, it
Think
was
of the
10.
money you
So
saved.
the cleaning took a little bit. I'm not going to
Yeah,
lie, and it was kind of
yeah,
painful. So I started going more often. I just went recently, and I had this chip on the front. One of my front
yeah,
teeth got this little chip on it.
yeah.
I don't know, something I ate or whatever, or just all of a sudden it was there. It's just right on the tip of the corner. And I was like, all right, so I better
Mm.
go to the dentist. And we just moved to Tennessee, so I got to find a new dentist anyway. So Sonia found me a dentist, which I was very grateful for. I go there, super nice people. Technology at this dentist is like top of the line. Like, they got their systems and their processes
Yeah,
down, man. It's pretty impressive. But
that's
anyway, I get
important
in
to
there.
you, I
They're
know.
telling me, yeah, we can fill that tooth, that corner of that tooth. I was like, well, what's the downside? She's like, well, probably every 2 or 3 years it may come off, depending on hit it just right or something. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's it. It's the only downside. She goes, yeah, and about 400, $500. I was like, okay. So I guess I'm not a vain person, I don't think, but I'm like, okay, well, I mean, it's not bad, but I guess if that's all it's going to happen, then that's fine. So went ahead and got it taken care of on like a Thursday, and then Sunday I was going out to eat with my wife after church, and we were eating, and she looks at me and she goes, "Your tooth is chipped again." I'm like, this is
Are
like
you
three
kidding?
days. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, except it's worse. I'm like, what do you mean it's worse? And then it dawned on me. I didn't think to ask this, and they didn't offer this in their dissertation on what the risks were. They ground the tooth back to add the filling.
Oh.
And so now it's like double the size. So I'm in like this quandary now of like, what do I do now? Do I get it done again? I don't know, man. So that's my current dentist story, and I'm
Wow.
living it. I'm living it
How
right
did
now.
we
It's
get
not
off on the
7 grand,
dentist? I
but
I
man,
just asked for a raise, and we got off on this dentist thing, so I don't
it's
know.
all good,
Next
man.
time I
It's
get
all
mad
good.
at you, I'm gonna thump you right on the front tooth, and so we'll
Well, you
see
can't
if
hurt
it
it now.
holds.
Man, you probably could, but
Hey, man, what a great guy we've got today. David Hampton is a phenomenal guy. Lives here in Nashville. I mean, like everybody's moving to Nashville. But anyway, he's been here a long time. This is a great
mhm,
guy. He's done a great job. He's really involved in being a certified professional recovery coach, and the people he's helped here is incredible. He can't tell us any names or anything, but he's there in Franklin's got a lot of cool people that he works with, and he's helped even 7 states. I think he said that he's
mhm.
working in virtually as well. But I think he's gonna rock the mic. Um,
Yeah, I think so too. Let me ask you a question before we get him in here. Um, what do you think about addiction itself? Like, first of all, he does a great job bringing us some really good nuggets and some really good helpful tips. Um, Listening to David's interview today, like, there's no question about that. Um, but I'm curious, like, I do you think that do you have an addictive personality to things? Like, do you have things that
oh,
you
100%. Oh, I do.
yeah?
Yeah, man. Alcoholism is rampant in my family, and
Mm,
a lot of the guys in my family and ladies, yeah, alcohol is a real problem, and so that's the reason I've personally chose to be totally abstinent. No
yeah,
alcohol. Never drink my entire life because I know that my addictive behavior, like, man, I would be an alcoholic in a minute because I'm all in. You know that when I do something,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I probably would do that as well. And so, as a safeguard, I've just said, hey, I'm going to break the family tree here, and I'm not going to carry this on, and I want to stop it
That's
here.
good.
And so, yeah,
Yeah,
but
so
I
let's
do have
get
an
David in
addictive
here. He's got a
behavior.
couple of questions. Have a pen and a paper handy, and he's got a couple of really good questions that he asks throughout this, actually, to help us identify, if we have an issue, or I think what's even helpful here. We didn't talk about this in the podcast, but I think also is that paying attention to those around us in our circle of influence that we can be of help to.
And I even
Um,
talk about an addiction that I've got. You'll have to listen to the interview to
it's
understand
in
what
there.
it is. And I wasn't even aware of it until
Yeah.
recently. So
All
let's get
right,
him in.
let's get David in.
Well, David, man, it's really an honor to have you on the show today. Thank you for being our guest. And you've got such a wealth of experience in a lot of things, as a dad and as a business person. But the thing that we really wanted to talk to you about today was being a certified professional recovery coach and what that looks like. So, no, I've already talked a little bit about you, but fill in any place that maybe I've missed just for a second. I know we're also fellow Nashvillians. You live not
Mm.
far from me
Yeah,
in downtown Franklin. So,
right.
man, thank you for being on the show today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity. I really do. Thank you and Wally both for having me today. So I'm real happy to share whatever I can. So
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. Our audience is comprised of men, in these mastermind groups. And we often have guys come up and say, hey, man, I've got this situation, I
hmm
maybe drank a little too much, or I've got this porn addiction,
hmm
or I work too much, like you need to help me kind of figure this out. And we've heard this over and over, and we've helped a lot of guys. But we thought having an episode to really dive deeply into addiction and what that was about. And I know you've got kind of a background of this yourself, and this is kind of what ultimately got you into being this recovery coach. And so, why don't we dive in, talk about your background, your story just a little bit? Tell us how you got into this profession.
yeah, thank you. I think I'm not unique in the sense that people who work in the addiction realm professionally, most of us have a background of our own, a story that we, maybe wish we didn't have or wish we could have gone back and done differently. But then, in a lot of ways, are probably pretty grateful for. If that sounds kind of unusual and odd, maybe, but. Um, I don't think if God had struck me sober like I had asked him to so many times, that I would have learned or grown in the way that recovery has taught me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
there's an awful lot I learned about me and life and my own commitment to not feel pain that recovery has taught me. I took my first my primary addiction was alcohol, and I took my first drink when I was 13, and I grew up in a very conservative Christian home. I had wonderful parents, and thankfully they're still with us. They're 86, and I have lunch with them every Thursday. But
Wow.
they're great people. They're the marriage that gosh, it's 66 years now they've been married, and
Wow.
they're wonderful people, and they raised us very, very well. But the background that I had at the time, we were in a system that I thought that God was unhappy with me a lot, and my job was to perform in a way to please Him. And so that as a kid, that put a lot of pressure on me to always wonder where I stood. And I never really knew if I was okay. And I was a musical kid. I was in a preparatory school of music from the time I was in the fourth grade at University of Evansville, where I grew up, Evansville, Indiana. And I went there and studied piano from the fourth grade until I graduated high school with the same college professor. And I had a piano lesson a week and a college kind of music group theory class a week. And it was a great program. And I was very fortunate. My parents had to really stretch for me to get to do that. But again, it really contributed to a lot of my anxiety because I was a performance-driven kid in my personal life, and I was a performance-oriented kid in my talent, in my extroverted gifts. Being an introvert with extroverted gifts is an interesting thing, but you start to develop this real deep anxiety and a pretty, in some ways, paralyzing perfectionism. And so my parents go to this Christmas party one night, and I'm 13, I'm home alone. I've told this story so many times to people. They left a bottle of Kentucky bourbon in the pantry because my dad had gotten it from a client, and he didn't really know what to do with it because they didn't drink, and he didn't want to give it to anybody because he didn't want to contribute to somebody else's issue and potentially. And so they just stuck it behind the baked goods in the back of the pantry, which I always joked is, now we know where Baptists keep their liquor, and so
Right.
that was that kind of thing. And I knew it was back there. I had always had a fascination with it, and maybe it was just because it was off limits. But anyway, they're gone, and I'm home alone, and it's Christmas time, and I am really curious about this alcohol back there. And I go in and I pour myself what I thought was a drink. I had seen my aunt and uncle who weren't Baptist mix drinks. And so I got these little tumblers out of the cabinet and filled it about halfway with this Kentucky bourbon, and the other half was 7-Up. And I took it in and sat in the family room with the Christmas tree on, and I sipped that drink. And in just a few minutes, I started to feel relaxed, and I started to feel less anxious, and I started to feel less perfectionistic, and I even felt like God loved me more. And I experienced things that I'd always wanted to experience all my life. And I decided this was my warm hug from God. I'd been lied to. This is not a terrible thing. It's not an awful, sinful, terrible thing to participate in. And I distinctly remember, and many people that suffer with alcohol abuse can tell you, they distinctly remember pressing pause in their mind and going, this is going to be a part of things. I need to do this about every chance I get, because this may just be the way to manage all that really negative stuff that I feel. And I didn't drink consistently after that. I didn't drink every day. I wasn't a kid that sat out on the hood of the car and drank. I didn't do any of those things. I performed. I was good on the outside. I had a great persona that I had developed to get me through life. And music continued to be good to me. I came to Nashville in 1987. I got married in 1981, 3 weeks before I turned 21, if you can believe that, which I don't recommend, but that's what I did. Nothing like growing up together.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
We did the
so,
same. We did the
oh,
same 2 weeks out of
Me
high
too. I
school.
married when I was 20.
oh
Yep.
Yeah.
man, oh
I
gosh,
was
30
19.
years in
Robin
May.
was
Yep.
barely 18, right? We get
oh.
married 43 years ago now. So,
Well, then you know what I'm talking about.
yeah.
You slugged it through all that growing up stuff together. So yeah, I mean, I was very young, but I had been writing some songs and certainly playing around different places, playing music and doing different things. Traveled some and decided that I could move to Nashville. I had made some contacts with the publisher that was a Gaither Music affiliate at the time, and so I had eventually my first publishing deal with them as a songwriter, and I came down here and eventually worked in the music for about 10 years, traveling and playing for artists, and had a different publishing deal after that, and it was going great. And
Drinking all the while.
mhm,
All the while you're
yeah,
drinking. It
yeah,
doesn't
but
even look like a problem to you, even now.
no,
Right?
at
Okay.
that time I would have said no, and I
Right. That's
don't.
what I mean. At that
Yeah,
time, it wasn't a problem. But
yeah.
I'm just curious. Did your parents catch you, by the way? You were 13?
No, they didn't. I
No?
had to
Okay.
tell them
All right.
about it, because they kept the foil box that the thing came in,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I had just stuck it back down in the foil box, and they never opened it. So
Sure.
they didn't really look at the,
Yeah.
amount that was missing. So yeah, no, they didn't catch me on that. They had to hear that secondhandedly later in life.
Okay.
My mom said she always dreaded Thanksgiving because she never knew what she was going to find out that we had done as kids when we were uh, younger. So.
David, I
Um,
want to go back just for a second before we get too far removed from part of your story, because I
mhm.
think it's important for our listeners to hear today. You were talking about your dad giving you these opportunities, and you went to this preparatory school.
Mhm,
And a lot of people strive to provide that environment for their children.
mhm,
Do you think that was a negative? Do you think that was a good thing? It
mm,
imposed this a mindset on you to perform, and you had to be at perfection. Do you
mhm.
think offering these opportunities to you were a bad thing for you necessarily?
No, I don't. And here's kind of I'm glad you asked that question because here's kind of the picture of my life. I didn't grow up, at boarding school level income with people. I lived in a very blue collar neighborhood. My dad, he eventually had his own HVAC business and refrigeration business, but for a long time he was, he was a pipe fitter. He worked for a number of HVAC companies around town. We had his service truck in our driveway, and we were very middle class people,
Mm.
and so when they sent me to U of E, University of Evansville, at that age, I was still going to my regular public school, but I had to be mom picked me up from school every day or on those music days a couple times a week and took me to these classes, and she'd fix me up, like a sandwich or whatever to eat on the way because it was going to be late when we got home. And anyway, bottom line, what it did for me, my music teacher, my college music professor, who was teaching me in this grade school kid, would take me to the Philharmonic in our local town, and she would take me to openings if there was some kind of art thing that she wanted me to be exposed to. And she exposed me to the University of Evansville had a great theater program, and she exposed me to a lot of things culturally that I would not have probably experienced on my own. And so I kind of had two different worlds going. I had the world I lived in and grew up in and functioned in. And then I had this other world where it was really cultural and people thought differently and experienced things differently and talked about God and life and the world differently. And so it was an interesting kind of dual role, but I don't think it was a bad thing for me. I think that I just translated my own my own neurosis probably on my giftings, and my abilities, and I just put those expectations on myself. I mean, I think there was a lot of external
Right.
expectation as well, but I own most of that, I think. But I think it was a great opportunity.
So where was the point in time where you said, okay, now I've got a problem?
Yeah. Well, it was way down the road. We were attending a Presbyterian church in Franklin that I eventually became the director of worship and arts for. My wife was diagnosed with a very primary progressive form of MS. In '94, our daughter was, we have one daughter, and Lauren was 5 when Tricia was diagnosed with MS. And so at that point, things were really strange because I was on the road and Tricia was starting to show a lot of symptoms, and it was getting kind of scary. And eventually I needed to leave the road, and the opportunity at my church opened up, and they offered me this position, and it was a great opportunity to work with super talented people and kind of do what I did already, but in a more worship-oriented environment and focus. And so I joined that staff at a point in time when the church was exploding. It was growing very, very quickly back in the early '90s, and we were just part of that big wave. And so there was a lot of, talking again about expectation, a lot of expectations on myself for that to go really well, because there were a lot of really scrutinizing people out there in that particular congregation, and really any congregation in the Nashville area. I mean, golly. I mean, that's
Get
just,
your capital, right?
yeah, if you're going
High
to do this,
expectations.
it's like going to the Grammys every Sunday
Yeah.
practically. But it was a good experience. It was a really, in many ways, a great experience. But I was very, very scared because Tricia was getting worse. She wasn't responding to the treatments that they were giving her. She was at that point, she was about in her late 30s and already starting to need a walker and eventually a wheelchair. And things were escalating, for her. And the sicker she got, the more I drank, is pretty much how it went. And I was angry. I didn't realize I was angry at the time, but I was. And I was fearful. And I felt like the things that I was being asked and required to do were exceeding my abilities and my training.
What
Uh,
were you angry about, and who were you
uh,
angry at?
well, I was angry with God. I was angry with Trisha for being sick, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's, the truth. And it's not like she, signed up for this. And I was angry with myself for not being able to handle it better at times, And I mean, I was having to learn, how to catheterize her and how to do things like that. And it was, it was not exactly the way
Not what you
that
signed up for.
the piano player for a nurse, bless her heart,
Right, right.
and giving shots and things like that, which the shots were the easy part. But there were a lot of things like that were starting to have to happen.
Mm.
And I remember just feeling like if I can just check out, I can be okay. I can function. If I can just give myself some kind of reward, this will kind of remove me from the pain that I feel, because I eventually realized that and this is over years of time, that I was losing her, and because she was in a form of MS that only a small percentage of people actually get. And so I was very scared. So she was no longer driving. She was not able to drive. So I was orchestrating my world around I brought my office to my house, and the church was great about letting me work out of there. But anyway, it was a lot of escalating fear, and I started having a lot of unwanted outcomes. And then I started, taking the long story short, which it really isn't, but started really trying to push through the unwanted outcomes in order to get to engage in the behavior that I thought I needed. And so then I decided I probably had a problem, and I tried to quit. And then I realized that I had a hard time quitting. And so, unlike maybe some people that would say, well, maybe that's the time to stop or go get help, I just amped up, and I just became a better liar and a better hider and a better, person that knew how to navigate all this stuff. And I had every way in the world to, navigate and mask my buzz, so to speak, throughout the day,
David, were
evening.
you rationalizing your behavior because of the problematic situation that you were in? Did you catch yourself giving yourself grace, giving yourself a pass? Because I see that with guys today. It's like, man, she won't leave me alone. I'm not making the money I
Hmm.
need to make. I'm having this
Hmm.
hardship with my children. I
Hmm.
deserve this. Like, it's
Oh,
okay.
yeah. Yeah, the I deserve is probably the two most dangerous words in the English language, because I did deserve it, I thought. And a victim with a sense of entitlement is dangerous. That's just the bottom line. And I thought I was a victim, and I believed I deserved what I was able to do. And I did justify it that way. And it worked until it didn't. I was forgetting things. I had a lot of unwanted outcomes at home. Trisha would, we were getting to the point. I drank every day for 5 years. I mean, just,
Right.
without an intentionally, didn't miss a day for 5 years. And she would say, "Hey, do you remember last night?" And my blood would just run cold because I didn't. And I thought, oh, crap, what's she going to ask me about? And she'd say, well, you talked to so-and-so on the phone. You might want to know that when you go in today and go to your meeting or do your whatever. And I'd be
Was
like,
she
oh.
accepting of you doing this? Was she wanting you to quit? Where was she
Mm.
at in this?
She was not accepting of it, but she felt kind of powerless because she needed me and I needed alcohol. And we had sort of a really strange threesome going on. That
Have
was
a
it.
mutual understanding.
Hmm. Yeah, and finally, she, just at the end, when I was really not doing well, I got up one morning, and she was very early, and she was still able to get out of bed at that point, and she was in the office and at the computer, and I'm like, "What are you doing in here?" And she said, I'm just working." I said, "What are you working on?" She said, "I'm working on a plan." I'm like, "Oh, what kind of plan?" And she said, "I think that I'm going to move in with my parents and let them take care of me. And I'm going to keep this as my legal address. And the only thing I'm asking of you is that you don't divorce me because I need your insurance. And if anybody asks you, this is where I live. And you can do whatever you want." And she said, I won't tell anybody that you're working with. I'll just be quiet, and you can tell people I got too sick to come to church, and whatever you have to tell people. But that's my deal. So I'm kind of sorting out budget here, and all I need is that you're not going to take me off your insurance because I don't have any alternatives at that point. And that was like, wow, are you serious? And that was the first of a couple of really strong wake up calls. Another one of them was with my daughter, who was about 15 when I finally got sober, and I realized that she didn't respect me, and she didn't want to talk to me, and she didn't like me, you know, and that's a lousy feeling.
You know, you talk a lot about there being a spectrum of addiction.
Hmm.
Um, is there a definition for addiction? Can you define that?
Well, it's a good question because the behavioral health community kind of has different camps of thought where addiction is concerned. But basically, we would define it as anything that people are willing to do, that they're willing to press through the unwanted outcomes and consequences in order to continue get to do. So it doesn't have to just be a substance. It can be a behavior. It can be what we call a process addiction. Gambling, porn, sex, eating, whatever those different things are. And sometimes we have co-occurring addictions that are, sort of a dual diagnosis kind of thing. And about 40 to 50% of the time, there's a co-occurring mental health issue that goes along with some type of addictive behavior. And usually anything from a anxiety disorder, generalized depression, to a bipolar 1 and 2 or whatever. But people are really with addiction. They're willing. And also there is with substances the physical dependency. I mean, there's that for sure, where your body just becomes dependent on the substance, and you have acute withdrawal symptoms if you don't participate in using the substance. You'll see people, not just alcohol, but particularly with alcohol, yeah, shaky hands, sweating, they're sleepless if they don't drink a little bit. And they're prone to seizures and things like that. Delirium tremens, withdrawal symptoms where you're physically dependent. But most of the time, what we will see is that there's this on the kind of continuum. It's the pushing against the unwanted outcomes, the increased use, the need to increase the use, the need to increase the time. You're willing to adjust your values to accommodate your behavior. So, in other words, I don't condone lying except if it allows me the opportunity to engage in my behavior of choice, whatever that is. I wouldn't steal, but I might if I needed to keep something that I was dependent on going. But what really is at the root of addiction is pain management. It's just pain management gone bad, and I wish our culture understood that more, because we have moralized it, and we've put it into a way of it being about behavior, bad behavior, and it is often results in bad behavior. But what it is pain management that has gone that quit working, and we continue and we continue and we continue, hoping that somewhere this will fix itself, that it'll go away. And there's kind of a four-legged stool that we talk about with addiction. It's trauma, shame, anxiety, and isolation. And so when somebody comes into my office and they are, concerned about their own behavior, and we start unpacking things and we start talking about things, it's very, very, very common for all four of those things to be showing up in their life, to support this need to disconnect from ourselves, from our reality.
Yeah, let's unpack that just for a second. Wally, I think I talked over you. What were you going to say?
That's all right. Is there maybe you said this in the last 5 minutes or so, and I just didn't pick it up, but is there a, is there a point at which there are some addictions, habits that
Mhm.
become addictions that are we would say are just fundamental. I would say, I shouldn't say we. I would say are fundamentally bad, right?
Mhm.
Or you could some of them are sinful.
Mhm.
I would say that, and there's other ones that I would say maybe are not. for myself, and there's a healthy and an unhealthy. So there's a mix in there, right? You could go from
Mm-hmm.
working, that can become an addiction, but we
Mm-hmm.
all need to work. So,
Yeah.
right, there's a healthy side to that.
Right.
I could say that, watching pornography, probably straight out of the gate, I'm gonna say that's an unhealthy habit. I don't know where that, the benefit of that ultimately goes.
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol, on the other hand, like with you, I would wonder to myself, okay, when does use become abuse?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people listening that use alcohol, drink alcohol to
Mm-hmm.
some level, and probably some of them are managing it just fine. If that's the one word we use, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then some are not.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, like, I don't know the answer to that. So is there like a use to abuse pattern or method or whatever you want to call it? Like, what was that for you? You had your first drink at 13. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you're underage, and that's a problem. But
Mm-hmm.
like, just legally, that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So, but did you use it along, and at some point it became abuse? Can you kind of walk through that and help us understand that? That'd be really helpful for me.
Yeah. I mean, with alcohol, for instance, there are a lot of people that are heavy drinkers, and we would call them chronic drinkers, but they wouldn't necessarily be in the on the addiction spectrum,
Mm,
uh, because they can stop. If they have an unwanted outcome, they quit immediately. If they get a bad health report, they go, "Oh man, I'm gonna, lose, some weight and get my liver enzymes back to normal." And I don't know, maybe I'll just stick to some wine on the weekend or something. I mean, and they could have been very heavy users,
mm,
drinkers. Um, things like porn. I don't think anybody's gonna, maybe I say nobody's going to try to make a case for porn. That's not true. But the thing about porn is that it's not automatically going to make you a sex addict necessarily, any more than experimenting with alcohol is going to make you an alcoholic. But the same kind of criteria would apply, in that for some people, their response to seeing certain images and their response to some experiences that they have with those images, what we'd call like their arousal template and things like that get
mm,
discovered. When they have that euphoric experience, the brain just saturates itself with dopamine, and other feel good chemicals. And when they get that rush, that's their escape, and they don't necessarily have the same reaction. They're able to drive, as opposed to maybe a person that's had too much to drink. But the dopamine rush and the feel good chemicals all hit, and so they immediately ask themselves, first thing, "That was awesome. When can we do it again?" you know so when's my next opportunity? And they begin to get on the same trajectory that a person that struggled with a substance would do,
mm.
and they begin to lie, and they begin to use excessive amounts of time. They're willing to take bigger risks. I can't tell you how many people that I've talked to that lost jobs because of work computers, that were compromised, and other things that go along with it. And then, there's always the discussion about whether, excessive porn use then leads to other acting out, or does it lead to more, taking the game into a more physical rather than a virtual place. And but I think, if I understand, Wally, what you're asking is, for some people, like, let's take work. Our culture applauds work. I mean, we need, and like you said, we all need to make a living, and the better we can do at it, the more chips we have, and the more pats on the back we get, and the more esteemed we are. And we all want to be envied. Everybody wants to be envied. I don't think envy is a problem as much as the need to be envied sometimes. But the same thing applies, though, because if I can lose myself in a behavior, if I can lose myself in work, if I'm working so that I don't have to engage with the things that are problematic in my life, or I don't have to face the fears that I have, or the place in my marriage that is broken. And work is interesting because very often, people will point to, well, look what I've, you don't have any trouble spending it. So what's the big beef with me, spending all this time making it, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And there's always that kind of friction, but it's also a piece of it that, the work thing, it informs a lot of things about who we are. But one thing that is common throughout most of these behaviors, whether it's alcohol, substances, sex, porn, whatever we're doing, anytime we don't feel like we have a voice or we don't use our voice in our lives, if we feel like we're living inauthentically, or there's what we'd call cognitive dissonance, stuff in our head that doesn't match, what we are living out, what we're experiencing. When we don't have a voice in our own life, and that could be our marriage and our job and our world, whatever that is, and we feel like life is happening to us, we will often result to, kind of that victim mindset, or that place of sideways behavior. Like in 12-step, you'll hear a lot of people say, my wife and I had a terrible argument and I drank at her, and drinking at people, drinking at situations, drinking at something, meaning, I'll show you, I'll check out. I just won't be here for a while, and I'll disconnect emotionally from you.
But
And so it's sort
that's
of
the same
sometimes a
thing.
weapon.
That's the same thing that happens with porn as well. Like in a relationship, I mean, you
Hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong. In a relationship with your wife,
Hmm.
if that intimacy is challenged, right? Like it's not going like, especially as a guy, right? I'm speaking from a guy's perspective.
Hmm.
Like if that's not
Hmm.
going as well, or like I think it should be, or as expected for whatever reason, whether I'm wrong or whether I'm right? That I'm thinking that
Hmm.
it's not. And so it can be a lot easier to use porn as a weapon to say, I don't actually need to work as hard in this relationship to still get quote unquote, right, the feelings that I'm looking for, which
Hmm.
really isn't the ultimate healthy feeling that we really, really truly desire.
Hmm.
it's a temporary hit.
Band-Aid. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the
Yeah.
similar thing. Is that
Yeah, I mean, very much. I mean, we all need to feel seen, heard, and known to experience love. To intimacy, and porn offers sort of a shortcut, bypassing intimacy just to a physical response, and it therefore is kind of this. It's sort of this shorthand to a physical response that bypasses this relational stuff that's really complicated and hard and messy, and that a lot of us aren't very good at times. And but yes, and it's also a way that when we become very often men, particularly, and we're finding that women use porn honestly almost as much as men now, which is getting interesting. But men often will use porn as a way of saying, I'm not getting what I need in this relationship. I don't know how to ask for it, and I'm kind of coming over here into this quick fix space, and that may be a big generalization in some ways, but it's pretty much where we go. It's a sideways behavior at somebody that we don't know how to address what we really need. Because men don't know how to say, I'm not feeling intimate and connected with you emotionally. And that that conversation is really hard for a guy to have sometimes without some guidance. And but that is what he's experiencing, or he's feeling in some ways managed and emasculated in his own world. He doesn't feel empowered, or he men use porn a lot when they're experiencing failure in a different area of their lives, and it's another escape. And but is it always addictive? No, but it can be, and certainly with regular use can be. But Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for walking through that. It's helpful.
David, we've talked
Sure.
about some of the addictions and the problems, and we always like to try to give some solutions and for people
Hmm.
to know how to respond. Is there one or two questions that you would suggest that we could ask ourselves? Because a gentleman uncovered to me one day that I'm addicted to activity. And I
Mm.
didn't even know to know that. I didn't even know what was going on until a person in, a counselor like yourself shared that with me. And I was like, man, this is like answers a lot of things for me that
Hmm.
I wasn't aware of. So, are there
Hmm.
prompting questions that the audience could ask themselves to
Hmm.
even find out, am I on this addictive path? What are some of those questions we could ask?
Yeah, and then depending on what we're talking about, maybe being addicted to. Um, but one thing would be, uh, am I? And as it is, we're assuming we're able to be really objective with
Sure.
ourselves too. By the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah. Otherwise,
so it might be good actually to ask these questions to your
somebody
best
else.
friend, and then
Right.
and let them
Yeah.
answer them for you. But am I using or doing something more to a strong extent more than I did a year ago? And what is that? Am I moving the bar down the field a little bit more every so often as to what I'm willing to um, do in order to engage in a behavior that I've been telling myself is safe, that I'm still okay with. And another question would be if I thought if someone were to come to you and think they maybe are in a problematic situation and they're having trouble addressing why. A question that we always ask people is, what are you committed to not feeling? What are you committed to not experiencing? And people will always kind of look at you a little inquisitively at first
That's a
when
great
you
question.
bring out that question. But the reality is if they can give it a minute, I'm not willing to feel vulnerable. I'm not willing to feel shame. I'm not willing to feel too close to anybody, because when you get too close to anybody, bad stuff happens. Or, if you have a trauma history or whatever. And trauma, too. I mean, we're not talking about having to run through a minefield in Kuwait, big T trauma. We're talking trauma is technically anywhere you feel alone in your pain, you know. So if you're just feeling like you don't have an empathetic witness to your pain, any event in your life where you don't have an empathetic witness to your pain, where you feel alone in it, that's traumatic. And trauma is a hard word for, again, men particularly, because it evokes these big, Saving Private Ryan kind of moments,
Right.
and that's not, I mean, that's traumatic, but that's not really ultimately really what trauma is. And so if you can ask yourself, what am I committed not to feel? And what am I committed not to experience? Very often you'll find that those answers are intimacy, connection. I'm not willing to feel shame, pain. I'm not willing to be alone with myself because there's way too much in here that's not congruent with with the persona that I've created to take out into the world as me, you know? So maybe those
That's a
things, but
good question.
particularly early,
Yeah.
what am I doing more than I used to? And what am I willing to do in order to get to do that? That sometimes tells us something.
What are some of the pathways to treatment? Like, what is even available out there today? Is it, in-house lockdown? Is it recovery? Is it celebrate recovery? Is it just one-on-one? Like, what are some of the things out there that are available
Mm-hmm.
for the audience?
Mm. Boy, that's a great question, because, some things work for some people better than others, and sometimes it's a trial and error game. I mean, certainly if we're talking about substances and alcohol, inpatient treatment is always available. I mean, certainly the 12-step groups are available. Those are great places to get connection with people. It gets people out of themselves and around people, because everybody with a dependency believes they're unique. We call it terminal uniqueness. And every person believes they're unique. And when you sit in a room full of people who say the same thing and have done the same things and even more, I remember my first 12-step recovery group meeting was that, people were the most honest I'd ever heard in my life. I'd never heard people be this honest in front of one another in my life. And I thought, dang, they're telling stuff on each other that, I was committed to take to the grave, and they're sitting there going, yeah, I need to get this off my chest because this is going to cause me to, potentially feel some triggers today. So I just need to say that, the resentment level I have right now for my wife is off the charts, and I'm living in a space of really self-centered fear, and I'm not sure what I'm willing to do about that yet. I'm like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So and stuff gets really real in those rooms, but you have those available. You have there's a group called Smart Recovery. It's an acronym for self-motivated actual recovery. I'm going to blow it anyway. It's SMART,
There you
and you
go.
can Google it. They're in your area, and what they are is a little bit different than a 12-step group. They're not as spiritually based, even though AA isn't a quote Christian group. It has its origins in some Christian beliefs, but the thing about the higher power for some people that are in an agnostic or even atheist position. The Smart Recovery helps because they kind of turn the tables into a more self-motivated model. But Celebrate Recovery is a great thing, for people who identify as Christians and want to be together and encourage one another. One thing I do like about Christian people going to regular 12-step, what I call regular, a basic AA meeting, let's say, is that I think it's really important for them to get around people that think differently than them and see how they've been able to navigate addiction. Because sometimes I think we can get caught up in real churchy language if we're used to that kind of speak. And we'll talk about things like sin, but we're not really sure what we're saying. And when you don't have that vernacular, you hear people get really honest with, how they identify some of the behaviors that they have. But those AA 12-step inpatient, but there's also some really exciting things that are going on right now in kind of the pharmaceutical place as well, with psychiatric medicine, where addiction is concerned. And, those things can be somewhat controversial, but they're starting to find a lot of clinical use for some psychedelics and things like that that used to be an option. But the first thing that everybody has access to, no matter what, is one friend. Tell one person. Just if you're suffering, if you're struggling, tell one person. Just tell one human being the truth, because that's what happened to me, and I ended up getting dragged into a bunch of meetings, and
That's a great first step,
somebody
though.
else thought maybe you.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was that?
That's a great first step, right?
Yeah,
Just, get with a buddy and share and say, hey, here's where I'm at. I'm not sure what to do. Be
yeah,
authentic, be genuine, be transparent in that environment where it's safe, and then kind of go from there. David, we don't want to take
yeah.
too much of your time. You've been very generous today in walking with us, talking with us, teaching us about addiction. If someone would like to reach out, what's the best way to do that for you? How can they contact you?
Yeah, they can go to my website at David Hampton CPRC. That just stands for Certified Professional Recovery Coach, davidhamptoncprc.com. There's a place there where you can, hit the contact button and send me a message, an email, and I'll get that. And that would open up a way for us to communicate. And I see clients on Zoom. I see them in
Cool.
person. I'm here in Brentwood, but I've got clients in about 7 states.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Very helpful, man. You got a lot of
Yeah,
skill, a lot of knowledge to add. So I can see why you've got people all over the United States. So that's awesome. Any final comments,
Well,
any words of wisdom as we leave today?
boy, wisdom. I think that I would encourage everybody to really be as honest with yourself as you can be, because if you can't be honest with yourself, you'll never be honest with anybody else. And above all, tell yourself the truth about what you're doing, and then ask yourself what you're willing to do about it. And that conversation may take a year, but it's worth having, because you got to tell yourself the truth first.
Yeah. It's a great life. We can live it out there if we're vulnerable, honest, and transparent and tell ourselves the truth originally. We can have a great life.
Yeah.
David, thank you for being with us
Yeah.
today on View from the Top.
Thank you, guys.
All right. See you, buddy. Well, hey, guys, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. David is just a phenomenal guy. I love his ability to just lay it out there, very simplistic. I mean, a lot of these guys you talk to, they use words that I don't even understand, but man, he just laid it out there, and he was so vulnerable up front with his own addiction. And I was so appreciative that he was willing to share that with us today. So I want you to take some of these steps that he's laid out. Go get somebody, and first of all, be honest with yourself, right? And then be honest with another individual. That's just a great, right first step to take in order to get yourself in a really good place. The reason I want you in a really good place is so that you too can go out there and have your own view from the top.
Hey, thanks again for listening in today. The easiest way to connect with us is really through our bi-weekly email called The Climb. Go to the website, viewfromthetop.com/climb. That's viewfromthetop.com/climb. Get it delivered every other week. You get notified of the podcasts, the new episodes. There's also some really other fantastic goodies that change up in there actually every other week a little bit to really help you find success and significance on your way to the top related to your family, to your business, and your personal improvement. So we'll see you next time.